So we're headed on live. All right, welcome to another Blueprint for Peak Performance. Ask Me Anything. I'm Brandi Smith. I'm the founder of Perfect to Know Physical Therapy and Performance Training and Perfect to Know PT Academy, online courses for parents, coaches, and athletes. Every week we come here and we have great experts that come in and out. We have amazing coaches, parents, and athletes who show up. And this week is an open Q&A. This is where we can kind of just have a roundtable. We can have a talk. I love to get to know people who are coaching and own gyms and parents and even athletes. During the school year, we don't have as many athletes come in. They watch these recordings. But what the topic that was brought up was a really good topic, and I do want us to kind of tackle it, but we're also going to reserve some anonymity about it. So it's going to be mostly my face, and I'm going to pin myself, actually. That would be helpful. Um, and what I just want to talk about, because it was brought up before we went live, it was brought up this topic that we have. It's a struggle with the teens right now because they're doing multi-sports. Some of them in some gyms are multi-sports, and then we also have a culture of single sport stuff going on. And we have kind of a small community that gets hyper focused on you do one sport at a time. And they kind of don't add anything else to the plate. But then we also have some athletes in that same community where things are expected to be one sported, trying to do multiple sports. And so what was brought up was this idea that whatever sport was first for that day, the second sport is getting what's left, right, of the athlete. The athlete has already utilized a lot of fuel, a lot of energy, a lot of time, all the things. The resources have been spent at maybe the morning sport or the sport at school, and then they come into the gymnastics gym, which is their paid sport, and they're really exhausted and tired, or they're missing the paid sport, which is gymnastics, a couple times a week because they're going to play other sports. And so what I wanted to continue on this topic about, because I found well, number one, it's a true struggle right now, is do we do single sports? Do we do multi-sports? And what we know, and this is also what what KE said to me a second ago, was that, like, I know, Brandi, you're a multi-sport advocate. And the reality is I am, because what we know for mental health, emotional health, and physical health, playing multi-sports, you are going to be healthier, right? So overuse injuries have just skyrocketed. More than 60 to 70% of our injuries in the United States in the youth injuries, that are treated by medical providers, has been well researched, are overuse injuries, which means we could prevent that. And there has been a rise in overuse injuries in youth sports and injuries as a whole, as there has been a shift in our culture from multi-sports, we just play all these different sports, we try things out, to a single sport paradigm. And so we also know that not just the physicality of it, but mental health and emotional health with the cross training, which part of that could be also just having different movement patterns, because part of what I teach in my Born to Move program and part of what we talk about with neuroscience and neurodevelopment is that if we have a large movement menu, right, whatever happens in the body happens in the brain. If I create a large movement menu, I create more flexibility in the brain, I create more adaptability, I create more emotional resilience. All of those things actually map in, are hardwired through having a large movement experience. So what we do in our body actually trains our brain, and that hardwires our brain. So I am an advocate for multi-sports, but what Kay was talking about is that there really is a problem and a struggle in how multi-sports are trying to be done at the moment. Um, and and she brought up a really good point, was this idea, and this was kind of the final talking point that you said, and I kind of want to open it up for us to talk about it, is that no one's giving, right? So it's like the baseball coach is coaching all the baseball players as if baseball is it. And the gymnastics coach is coaching gymnastics athletes as if gymnastics is it. The tennis coach is, coaching tennis is the only thing. And the cross country coach is running them as if there is no other sport happening besides cross country. And so this is a problem. And Elaine, a few weeks back, talked about, when we had a parent asking, well, maybe it was a couple months ago, she asked, like, well, how many hours should I have her train outside of the gym if she's doing this? And we're like, oh, well, what else does she do? She's a gymnast and she's a cheerleader. And should we add this many running? And should we add this many whatever? And this kid's like 7, right? And it's like, well, how many hours of training do we have? And so the problem is each coach, this is the problem. We're going to identify the problem, which is quite easily identifiable. And then we'll see where this conversation goes. But each coach is looking at the athlete as I can take from this full bucket. And the reality is that no one's realizing that you've got this orange bucket over here that's gymnastics, and this pink bucket over here that's tennis, and this other bucket over here that's dance, or whatever sports they're doing. They have multiple buckets that are now pulling from the same pool of energy, time, money, resources, and both physical, emotional, and mental resources, right? Coach Levi talked about having the physical bucket, the mental bucket, the emotional bucket. You can even go further into the spiritual bucket. But they're all drawing from, like, each sport is taking from the same bucket. And so by the time you get to the end of the day, it's like empty. And you can fuel till the cows come home. Carrie Bear is going to be coming in the end of this year, and we need to fuel, right? So if you have a multi-sport athlete, they better be fueling for multi-sports. That's one aspect of it. And they better be sleeping, right? So if you got too many sports, I'll never forget. So you're talking to a multi-sport athlete who did go to collegiate gymnastics. But I grew up in a small town, and a town of 3,500 people, and I joke 10 coon dogs. But like, I grew up in a really small town and in high school. I moved a little bit before that, but I was in high school in a small town, and I had the great opportunity of trying cheerleading. I was actually the captain, the co-captain for 2 years, junior and senior year. I did track. I qualified varsity track freshman year. I did powerlifting, which I did for 2 years. I did volleyball. Actually, my freshman year, I did volleyball. I tried basketball, realized that was not for me. And I also tried cross country. So at one point, I remember and my parents said to me, there's a breaking point. They're like, you have to pick. Because I was a freshman and I had moved into this new tiny town, and I was trying to find my way. Where do I fit in this group, right? And how do I find friends? Because we literally moved 2 weeks before school started. And so I joined the volleyball team because that was the week before school. And I thought, oh, I can meet some people. And I had played some volleyball in junior high a little bit on the side. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna try out this volleyball thing. I think I can do that. And so I started the volleyball training before, but then at some point decided I wanted to try cross country because I thought running would help me with gymnastics, and I just wanted to try it. And I liked where they were running. They're running out in these beautiful state parks near our town. And so I did, I think, a couple weeks. I don't think my parents let me go more than 2 weeks, but I had cross country in the morning at 5 a.m., 5:30 in the morning. Then I went to school and I had volleyball practice as part of our school. And then sometimes we'd have a game after school. And then I'd drive straight from the game and go to gymnastics. And I would train for 4 hours. And I'll tell you right now, knowing how my calorie intake was and was already a struggle, no way was I getting enough calories for that. I was underfueled already as a gymnast alone. And so I didn't know REDS at the time, but I definitely was. And I was in advanced classes, AP classes, that kind of stuff, dual credit courses, things like that. So my parents came to me after 2 weeks and said, you have to pick. And I, of course, got rid of the 5 a.m. because that was the easiest thing to dump. But what I wanted to say to that is that, so I've seen the stretch and strain where it's like, look, that just doesn't work. And that didn't work for me. That was too many. But I stayed in volleyball. But I only stayed in volleyball that year. I think the next year I struggled with some overhand serves, and I was just like, this isn't really working for me. I know where my energy and time needs to be, which was gym, because I wanted to do college gymnastics. And so, but the benefit and the blessing is that I used track to help me get better for vault. And I became a vault specialist in college. I was fast. I still am fast. I did 100 meters, 200 meter dash. I did the 4x100 relay, 4x400 relay. I tried hurdles, and I finally, after eating it multiple times, I said, done. This is affecting my ability to put on a leotard. I'm not okay with this. And I did triple jump and long jump. Now, if you think about it, all of those movements help build a strong vaulter and tumbler. And then I did powerlifting, which I also did because I felt like I needed to get some weights. And I thought, no, number one, I thought it'd be fun because I'd get to, there's a small group of girls, they were trying to get a team together. And I held the state bench record for the 114 class. I held a state bench record for a while in the state of Texas. And that was super cool and fun. And I got to meet a bunch of people and do all these fun things, right? But I also, in the back of my mind, thought I had done a little bit of weights in junior high with one of my coaches, and I realized that weights were important to my training. And so I went into the weight room so many times a week to lift. Now, here are where the giving, and then also I was a cheerleader, and we had a cheer class in school, right? So I took the cheer class, but then we had practices after school periodically. And we didn't do them all the time, but we had them. And being in a small town and a small gym, I was able to say on Friday nights, which was our varsity football games, could I come in Wednesday instead of Friday and train? And so we kind of were able to shift our schedule, which actually kind of worked well because everybody wanted to go to the football games. Like, it was a small town, just like KE was saying earlier, everyone's into the high school sports. And so because it was a small town, everybody's into the high school sports. The gym actually kind of shifted their older girls' schedules so that we could all go to the games on Friday, which meant that there was a number of us who actually became cheerleaders for fun. And so here's the thing, though. My cheer coach knew that I was training a crap ton of gymnastics hours, and they loved that I could tumble. I was one of two that could tumble down the field. And so if I had a practice that conflicted, she's like, can you come in during this, whatever, and we'll do the whole thing with the whole team. But then when we need to go do XYZ, we'll just pull you out of this part and you can go to gym and we'll finish practice. So there were cheer practices that as a co-captain, I actually did not always attend. It wasn't all of them, but there were some because I needed to go to gym. And then on the other flip side of that, I was not required by my powerlifting coach, the weightlifting coach, to go to every single weight training because he knew I was already, and we had this conversation, you're conditioning at gym already. You're already doing all these things. He's like, can you just get in the weight room twice a week? If you can come in 3, that's great. And so that worked out, right? So I share this story because, and then the track happened during school, and then there was a short period right after school. And if I came in fresh off a track practice, it wasn't a vault day that day at gym. We would do timers and stuff and do a few things. But she's like, if your legs are feeling too much, let's just go do, more bars and beam today, do some light tumbling, light vault, and move on. Right. And I didn't do a lot of leg conditioning because I'd done a ton of stuff in track. Same thing with weights. My coach in high school, she actually said to me, like, okay, well, I'm really sore. I lifted yesterday. We did this, this, and this. And she'd say, okay, well then, just drop your numbers or change this around for your conditioning today. And what I didn't realize, I was really blessed to get a little bit of customization instead of the cookie cutter, do 20 V-ups, do this, do that, because they recognized I was doing a lot more outside of the gym. And those other sports also recognized I was doing a ton in the gym that was already getting me prepared to do what they were asking me to do. So what we're dealing with, and part of what I want to talk about, I want to open up y'all's experience with this, because granted, I don't want to know say how many years that was ago. Well, I guess I can, but this was more than 20 years ago, and it was in a small town, and I was really good. Like they wanted me to be able to do triple jump, long jump. They wanted me to be running the 100 meter because I was one of the fastest kids in our team. I held the bench record. So they wanted to make a statement, right? So there was somehow humility on the high school coach's part to recognize that they weren't necessarily creating this rock star runner, and they weren't creating this amazing state champion, world state record holding weightlifter. They were recognizing that it was being created at the gym and had been created there for many, many years, since I was 3, right? And on the gymnastics side, she was being humble and open to the fact that she didn't have to push my way or the highway, and this is the only way it's going to happen in order to create a good athlete or to get to the final point. So she was open to the fact that I shouldn't push you today because you did this other thing. I'm going to trust the process. It'll work out. Now, granted, I am the only collegiate athlete that ever came out of the gym. That coach was fairly new and actually learning. She'll tell you even to this day, I was learning as Brandi was getting to those levels 9 and 10. She was pretty golden up to like 7 or 8. And then at 9 and 10, we were learning together. And that was fine. It made her very open to everything. She was a great coach. She's actually one of the best coaches I had as far as, well, number one, dance. Number one, my leaps and jumps were amazing in college because of her. But I find that openness actually is what kept me in the sport during a period when I was only one. I mean, the closest athlete to my age at my gym in that small town was 5 years younger. And I was it. And I had been the only one, and I was in a different town and a different gym 4 hours away. And at that gym, by junior high, the closest to me was 4 years younger than me. So there's something we need to look at, this attrition, when kids attritiate out of the sport at junior high school levels. It's partially because we're being very rigid in our structure of what it looks like to be a gymnast. And I know, and KE, we're going to have that conversation in a second, because I want you to bring that up about how these athletes are feeling, not prepared and things. But I'd like to pose a question or a thought and see how can we work this out amongst the high school sports, the junior high, middle school sports, and other club sports. There's so many club sports now, like volleyball, soccer, swimming, diving. I've got a couple of gymnasts that both competitively dive at high levels, and they do gymnastics at high levels. And I've got some gymnasts that are doing cheer and gymnastics, especially on the Excel side, cheer, dance, and gymnastics, and many of them all three, some of them all three. So how can we, because what I'm hearing is exactly what you said, no one's willing to budge on their training program. Like, this is how it's done, and that's it, and I'm going to train the best basketball player ever. This is how it's done. I'm going to train the best gymnast ever, and I need 20 hours. I need 10 hours. And no one's taking a moment and going, hey, what is this kid doing over here? And how can that be helping this? Can I give them credit? Because they should. The body and the mind and the emotions already went through all that lifting I did in the morning, right? Why do I need to do extra conditioning on top of that? Maybe I can balance out and change and shift my conditioning because I lifted weights that morning. So the question I kind of pose is a couple things. One, KE, I want you to share with us like how these athletes are feeling, but I also want to pose the question of like, how can we as a culture start to shift our paradigms, our thoughts, to begin to incorporate what are these athletes doing elsewhere, and how can that be beneficial? How can that be building my program, their ability to do gymnastics, right? And how can we open up these communication? Because I'll tell you, the track coach never talked to my gymnastics coach. The weightlifting coach never talked to my gymnastics coach. Gymnastics coach never talked to them. Cheer never talked to gymnastics or track or weightlifting. Like, these people weren't talking to each other. They just had the humility and the realization that there were other things training me to do what they were asking me to do. And that's how they could support each other. So I just gave my example because I wanted to talk about it. And I do think this is a big problem. Number one, I think more people need to do multi-sports. But KE, you're saying, oh my God, the ones who are doing multi-sports, it's like horrible. It's not working out. And so go ahead and share for us, KE, if you will, what, you know, how do I say this? What struggles you're seeing or what, how the athletes are feeling that are in these multi-sports and what they're struggling with right now in your gym and in your community.
Parents don't want to pay for if they miss. Um, when athletes, you have perfectionists or whatever, when athletes miss, then they don't give themselves grace to miss. And so then they still have the expectations that they should be able to do X, Y, and Z. Um, and in reality, um, they need to give themselves more grace or more time. And then so their parents need to give them more grace and more time. Um, if you're doing a sport that's kind of similar to the sport that you have, they come in and um, their bodies are kind of beat up. So then when they come in, then they have this ache and that ache. And so then they, end up sitting down. And so they end up kind of distracting from um, from the group because, they're tired. So when athletes are tired or they're, and they're kind of aching and hurt, then, you know, they would rather talk to somebody else and kind of get them off task and off target. Not that they're doing it on purpose by any means. They're just tired and so will talk to them. And then, and gymnastics is hard. Um, so those are kind of, the things I think that, parents don't want to pay for something that they aren't able to
Attend
put,
everything.
put for force into. If you're doing cheerleading and gymnastics, you have mechanics and then you have a spring floor up, and then in cheerleading, if you're doing, the bad mechanics on like a basketball court, it's a lot more taxing on the body. So then they don't communicate with you like how many reps or how many back handsprings they've done. So, um, I feel then you're into, overusing.
Yeah, 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 for sure. For sure. I mean, yeah, if you don't add up, yeah, because you're getting impacts, right? Yeah, it makes
And
sense.
then so that, the gymnasts then themselves, get burnout of I mean, like if it's cheerleading, they've done all, like you said, gymnastics is the base of pretty much any foundation of sports, So if they're having a hard time and struggling through like the gymnastic point, most of the time when you're getting up into your high school years, you're hitting a hard part of gymnastics. You're hitting the mentally and physically hard parts of gymnastics that you have to kind of overcome. Whereas if it's easier to go and do cheerleading to where everybody thinks you're a star and you've done all the work for them or other athletics, and so then they give up the hard because the hard is hard. And then you have and if their parents are paying for it, and then parents don't want them crabby and the kids crabby, and it just kind of seems like it's a vicious circle that um, sometimes gymnastics doesn't win.
Yeah. I mean, you named it. Gymnastics is hard. It takes like a special person to want to go through that plateau. There's an average plateau in junior high and another one in high school because between growth spurts and actual just natural progression of skill levels, yeah, it can be hard. And even in Excel, right? Because it just depends on where they started. Um, so I'm just curious, LR, do you have any thoughts or experience as well on kind of this struggle with multi-sport versus single sport? Um, you know, any thoughts?
I do have the same issue with parents not wanting to pay for tuition if their kids are not going to attend, but I'm a 100% advocate for multi-sports, and I don't bring more people on my team that I can't pour into. So what I mean by that is that I know what I've learned is um, that gymnastics is hard to explain to people. It's hard to explain to parents. It's a different culture on its own. But other sports, they're easier to attain. That information, more people watch them. So I made it a habit of teaching my athletes how to be multi-sports athletes. When I have that conversation, when I bring them onto the team, I don't talk to the parents. I have the parents there, but I ask the kid, what are your goals? What what do you want to get out of being on this team? This is the kind of coach my expectations for when you're here. This is just who I am, what I expect, and also what are you looking for? What kind of coach what do you think a successful coach is? And then I also ask like, what are your other activities? And when I switched to coaching Excel at a different gym, it was strange because I was like, hey, what sports do these kids play? What are their other activities? And the director's like, we never asked. And that's one of the first things I do. What else do you do? It also helps me too, because they know. So a lot of my high schoolers now work for me. But throughout their gymnastics career, they knew if they played volleyball. When you come in, you start your wrist rehab. You have a workout. If you had volleyball on Tuesday, Thursday, we have gymnastics Monday, Wednesday, Friday. There were things they needed to do in between to make sure they kept their body healthy. If they were coming into practice late, they know to say, hey, I just came from soccer. Okay, I just knew you just ran for 2 hours. Can you please go grab the foam roller, start rolling out, then jump into your warm up? If I can, I let them know, hey, on Monday, Wednesday, we're going to start off with vault this week. You're going to be missing vault twice. So they know, ahead of time, not coming into practicing, oh, hey, what are the rotations? At my other gym, they're pretty consistent, so they know what they're missing. And then I also let them know, I have a few kids who their school requires them to do sports. So they have to play a sport every single season. So I just let them know, hey, you're going to miss X amount of practice. This is what your gymnastics is going to look like. Can we set realistic goals? I never give them something that, not that I don't feel that's attainable, but I know your Chinko will take a whole year to drill out. I'm not going to put that on your skill list. If your parents ask why, this is the reason why. We can work on it, but this is not a skill you will see this
This year.
season.
Yeah.
So I just find for myself is just being 100% honest, no matter what age they are. My girls know I do not sugarcoat it, so they don't expect me to lie to them. They don't expect me to say anything different, and they know. So I think that helped also creating a culture for your high schoolers. That's one thing I'm doing at my new gym. It's a lot of people don't work with that age group as much. And listening to my girls who coach with me, they're like, hey, now that I want to do high school gymnastics. And half of the reason was because the kids their own age and they see
Yeah.
some of them have their siblings on team. I don't want to be in the same level with my sister, so now I'm discouraged. But what does that look like separating like warm up? So for example, yesterday, my platinum girls, we warmed up together, but then I had them stretch on the side. We just had Halloween. Some of them haven't seen each other. Stretch on your own, get that conversation out, just make sure you're productive. And I'm still walking around correcting as I go along, but they were separated from my silver and gold. Because I think by now you should be able to warm up yourselves. Like, it's still some help. I'm still engaged, but I shouldn't have to micromanage you as much. And I noticed giving them that responsibility, that ownership over themselves, which sometimes you don't get in other sports, that helps them out. So we start off practice, I'm feeling a lot more motivated, a lot more engaged, and I don't have to hear about their weekend while I'm trying to get things done. But it was like, I think it's just that we forget what it feels like sometimes to be a teenager. And also when you're a lot of Excel programs, you're getting your DP girls in. And the reason why they're choosing Excel is because they are burnt out and their friends have played soccer. And like, I've never played soccer. I've never played volleyball. And they're so excited. And then we take that excitement away when they come in and we're like, oh, you missed practice because of soccer, but they're proud of what they did in soccer. So it's just saying, hey, your soccer coach may not address gymnastics, but I'm going to address that sport. So I know I see them the most, most likely for their sports. So like I said, like I've made it a habit to train my girls on how to play multiple sports, keep themselves healthy. I explain that to the parents, like your kid is now on team or they're now moving up from silver to gold. We're doing a lot more front tucks, a lot more punching skills. at home, I still need some calf raises. I still need this because sooner or later they're going to start complaining about their ankles, their wrists from overuse. And this is how we prevent it. Because no one pays attention to that overload because you have a basketball mom, a soccer mom, a track mom. So I think it's just on our end, just learning how to explain our sport a lot more. And it's sometimes it's a little tedious. Sometimes they don't want to listen, but you can at least say you said it. And then if you have to retire a few girls, sometimes it's best for their body, but also helping them realize like, oh, maybe cheer is a lot better. And if this is your last season, we're going to make this a great season. And then let me know later, maybe you need a private lesson to help you out. I can still support you in that area if the sports correlate. So I don't know if that was helpful.
It was really helpful. So one of the things you mentioned, LR, was you mentioned autonomy. And, I was thinking, and also you mentioned recognizing the other sport in a positive light. So I'm looking back, thinking about my own experience and why it was so successful is that actually that coach, she came to a couple of our we had a couple special things, like we did a Men in Black dance during homecoming and whatever. And she came to the homecoming game, right? And was like, dude, that was an amazing dance. Can we please have some of that choreography in your floor team? She was like, like I remember one time she came and watched us dance and I was like, I made this dance up, which is funny. But I choreographed several dances for our cheer team. And she came and watched some of them. She watched some videos a couple times and she was like, dude, like that's like good stuff. Like we should put that in your floor team, like next choreography or on your beam, choreography. And so what I say to that is not that she's trying to make cheer gymnastics, but that she was acknowledging that I was doing something fun. And I was doing something fun with my peers. That's honestly what I did. Because I didn't have any peers in the gym. And so she was acknowledging that I was doing something fun. And she also was picking out things she liked and being like, let's throw it in. And like a couple times she threw it in and, things didn't work. We didn't always use something like that. We tried a couple things. She's like, oh yeah, that's good. And then, it worked a little bit. And then a couple of places it didn't work. And, it wasn't that she had to use all the cheer dance that I did. No, but what she was saying was you showed it off. Can you put that on the floor? And I actually remember gaining some confidence through that experience because I actually used to be really like, hesitant about showing it off on the floor until I started doing cheer. And then everything was about the show. And so, and I think actually she did a really good job of like bringing in like, hey, I saw you really light up having fun, showing it off, right? Showmanship of the cheer and being a part of that team. Let's bring that to the floor, right? So I think like it's really interesting and things that I heard there's a lot in there actually, LR, but one is acknowledging the other sport and how can we acknowledge that they're having fun, like just simply saying, man, it looks like you're having a lot of fun with soccer, what are you loving about it? Simple questions like what are you loving about it, because I think there still is this closed, how do I say this, closed mouth, closed thoughts, closed whatever, which comes in the attitude of, and you said it a second ago, LR, which is you're late, you missed the first round, catch up. Your assignment is catch up. Like it's like instead of being, wow, what did you do today at soccer? Okay, let's take it easy on this. You already did some running today, and just letting them, just having that positive light will change things. And I love your idea of giving them a lot of autonomy and that talking space for the teenagers, because I am realizing this is something I've noticed over the years, and it seems worse in the last 2-3 years. That our teenagers, our tweens, it's starting right around 6th grade, they're losing autonomy everywhere. And that's like one of the worst things you can do for outcomes, any outcome, learning, performance, etc. But I'm noticing through the public school system, my daughter just hit 6th grade, and I am noticing they are losing autonomy everywhere. And I don't know if it's just like, in the state of Texas, we have all these standardized testings and no one's really doing well. And, everybody's stressed out about all these things. And it seems like the answer is kind of counter to what the research shows us to do, which is to micromanage. The answer has been for safety reasons, right? So there's all these issues happening and we do have to have our schools safe. So there's safety reasons that things are happening. And then there's like fear reasons because they're afraid that they're going to get penalized for all these standardized testings that people aren't doing well on. And that's like the outcome measure. And then there's also this fear that they're not preparing them to move on to high school, and this like huge quick pressure to grow up fast. Like you should figure out how to organize, and you should, it's like sixth grade's a huge learning curve of like organizing yourself and managing information and data and deadlines, and like time management is a huge thing. And it's like they're in sixth grade, man. Like they're gonna figure it out. Give them some stuff, make them have to manage it, but don't like, overload. Like all of a sudden the learning curve has to be really fast. So what I'm noticing, and then I don't know what seventh and eighth grade. I mean, I've worked with seventh and eighth graders clearly, but I've not been in there like every day, all the things. But it appears to me, maybe you guys can also kind of tell me if that triggers something, but it seems like in middle school and high school, they're on the surface, they get to pick some electives, they get to change classes, and there's some things happening. But when you go deeper, they're constantly being told exactly what to do and exactly what's expected. And there's like a huge loss of autonomy. And I do think that that's a great idea, LR, to create autonomy for your older athletes, because they love to feel that. I am noticing, well, I've always noticed this, but that they love to be in charge. They love to be in charge of themselves. They love to feel independent. And the only way we give them feelings of independent is positive choices, right? Like you can do this or this. Can you do this? Start this. And they do the thing and they make up the thing. Or, so how can we create more autonomy is one question I'd have for this culture for our tween to teen kids. And I definitely could see how, creating more autonomy. So I remember I would come in late for practice after certain events or meets or whatever, and I would have to do my own warm up. And I was never guided. Like at that point, she's like, "You should know your warm up," and I'm like, "Yeah, I got this, and I'll be ready for the next rotation." Right. I also think a really good point was that open authenticity, like being really clear about expectations, um, and about letting them, I'll support you wherever you are situation. Like this idea that, I'll support you wherever you want to go, but I'll be honest, in order to get a Yurchenko, we need this much build up to that, which just means if you want to play these other sports, it might take us another 6 months, right? That's okay. I'm okay with it if you're okay with it. I think there's a great benefit to the other sports, right? So like it's like having that conversation that like they're letting them know there's a benefit to what they're doing and give them the benefits. I'm glad you're with people your own age. I'm glad you're having fun. I'm glad you're moving and having fun. Those are really good, important things. You're getting extra exercise in, which is great. And it's different than what we do here, which is also good. And you're learning something else. So like every sport has different things they learn. Like in cheer, I learned how to become a little more of a showman, right? And sure, you thought that I should have learned that in gymnastics, but in doing things with a group, I got more confidence in being a showman. And the more practice I got in being a showman, the easier it was to bring it over into the gym. So I love the idea of the autonomy, creating a culture where we recognize other sports. Also like finding positives in those other sports. If we're just, and I love that, just kind of shifting our own paradigm of what, how, and it's not even, the thing is we have to think about, it's not even verbal, it's nonverbal too, because that's where a lot of our communication come from. But it's like when they come in the gym, what's my demeanor? What's my tone? What's my, oh man, like, am I annoyed because now I have to figure out how to help them get caught up or whatever. And the question is, and that's what I like also, LR, about your being honest and everything else, is there's no catch up. There's just, this is where we are. And how can we use these sports to support each other? I think that's really great. Do either of you guys have any thoughts on how to create a more open dialogue or culture, in the sport, to accept multi-sports, to really, like, what if we, instead of these kids are like coming in, Like how else can we support them in doing multi-sports? I mean, I understand like this concept that we give them autonomy and that we really honest about what it takes to get certain skills. Um, but another question is like, as a coach, are there places in my workout that I'm like, she just ran a bunch. Like, do we really need to do sprints today? Do I need to do plyos today? Like, could we take from and have open dialogue with the athlete? And you guys tell me if this is possible, but could you have an open dialogue with the athlete and say, what did you do at soccer before you came here? And so, oh, well, we just did a bunch of these drills and the foot this and this. And oh, by the way, he made us do all these squat jumps across the whatever. Could we have that conversation and go, okay, that gave me a lot of information. Here's plan B, because plan A was that we were all going to do plyos this afternoon. And maybe the other kids are doing plyos, but maybe your three athletes. And if you had multiple athletes, if this creates a culture, you have multiple athletes that just came from track or soccer, you know, okay, you guys did a bunch of legs today. Why don't you guys do plan B, which is, I want you to do the arm circuit over at bars, this, and this. Like, is there places where we can create more flexibility? Is there places? Yeah, go ahead, LR.
Yes, I'm not for other sports, just due to injuries. Every single circuit, I always have one that can be changed out. So if I have girls who are currently in PT at floor, if we have like an ab station that you can't do, or there's something that you can't do, that's where you do your PT, or you do um, and now for sports, lately everyone plays volleyball. We're losing a lot of kids volleyball. Love it, but they're coming straight from volleyball games. Well, you're not gonna um, join whatever conditioning we have at that moment. Let's do whatever you didn't work on. So I always have at least one portion of my drills or setup where it can be changed out, where I'm not where it's not set in stone. It's not skill specific sometimes um, that I use. And like I said, it just started from having so many injuries. And that was stemmed from only doing gymnastics. So a lot of my DP girls switched over to Excel and then we're prehabbing them or rehabbing them because they still love the sport, but it's changing what that sport looks like for them physically and mentally. And so just
So let me get clear though. You said that you're having a lot of injuries. So it was coming from the DP world because they were doing just gymnastics.
yes, that's what I felt like. And
Yeah, no, that
like I
makes sense.
said, parents don't ask questions, and that's what I'm getting now when talking to more people. It's like, I did not know this or I didn't know that. And I'm like, oh, and because they don't, who's gonna really sit and watch a 3 hour practice? They're not. So they come watch the first one and no one knows exactly what their kid is doing at practice. And also some parents don't take those injuries seriously. So it got to the point where I'm like, your kid has to see a doctor before they come back to practice. Did you know? And they're like, oh yeah, they've been complaining about their knee or their elbow for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, just
So,
having,
but you're doing so you were saying though, you were taking these, so yeah, a bunch of DP kids that are now dropping into your Excel class. And when they're in the Excel group, are they also doing other sports too now?
yes, now they're
Oh,
trying other sports. Because now they actually have, is not the issue was a lot of them played soccer and it was conflicting with their schedule. And a lot of their friends are now in soccer. A lot of your friends are not going to continue with you in gymnastics. So it was like they wanted to be where their friends are. And our Excel program allowed that a little bit more flexibility to do
yeah.
so.
Yeah. And with those kids, you're with the soccer kids and also the fact that you know that they're they're rehabbing from being DP and kind of doing overuse too much stuff. Um, are you this is where you're using the flexible stations?
Yes.
Yeah, I like the idea of more flexibility in our lesson planning. And I'm open to ideas from you guys on how to create a more flexible lesson plan situation. Because in the DP world, especially, there I have coaches that will plan out for the year. right? Which I think is good, right? But you can get kind of rigid. And when you have so many athletes, I've also heard lots of complaints like, well, how do I make it, specific to this athlete or that athlete? And the way that I've always kind of looked at training, there's some basics that everyone should be doing, like basic big movement stuff, right? And variations of that, squats, wide and close, and different squatting positions and things like that. Developmental movement patterns, those should be thrown in for everyone. Landing, jump technique, landing techniques, all that stuff needs to be like, there's basic stuff that everyone just in general globally needs, right? But then you have some athletes who have had a history of back stuff, or some athletes that have a history of arm stuff or whatever. I think part of the flexibility that I'd like to see, and you guys can tell me if this is possible, but like when we know that certain athletes move too much from their back when they do arms or leg movements, can we modify? So instead of everyone has to do a V up, right? Which V-ups are not my favorite, by the way, because they're all hip flexors, but they have their value, right? But if everyone has to do a V-up, and you see that 3 of the 10 out there have their backs arched off of it, or you see that they're doing mostly predominant just flopping of their legs, which is like a lot of hip flexor, could we easily adjust on the fly to those kids bending their knees? And it's not a problem, it's part of the training. Could we, like, it's not a weakness, a sign of weakness that your athlete down here can do. I went and saw physical abilities testing this summer at one of the gyms. I was just traveling. I wasn't even there for a performance thing. I knew the coaches there, and I just said, hey, I'm gonna come in and say hi. And they said, yeah, come on in. And I watched their performance, their physical abilities testing. And there was a lot of cheating. Like, and the coaches were just counting, right? It was like counting. And I was like, the form, and they would stop the technique when they got off of form, but off of form was like, could they get their leg all the way to the top or whatever? Whereas there was no looking at the movement that happened between the beginning to the outcome, which was like, I'm hanging on a stall bar and lifting up my legs. I'm doing chin ups. It was just, can I get my chin over the bar? How many? It was, how many can I get my legs there? Versus the idea of each athlete coming up and seeing their own physical abilities. And I don't know, do your knees need to be bent when you're trying to get your legs up to the bar? Because that gives you a good rib cage to pelvis connection, and you're actually using your core than your hip flexors, versus just, like arching to get there. Chin ups. Can I maintain the ribcage pelvis like really nicely? And are they breathing while they do it? These different little nuances that I know there is something to look at, but the thing is that you're talking about the same coaches that are looking at, is every shape and line, is the toe pointed? Like, all of a sudden when we get into our stations and our movements, we get this blanketed thing for everyone. And so I'm just curious, like, could we create this type of flexibility where it's like, there are 3 different versions of how you could do a V-up. There are 4 different versions of how you do a dip. There are this many, versions of this. Could we, or maybe on a drill set of things, you have 3 different types of drills they could do to get a straight body handstand, or 3 different types of drills to do the jump back for a back handspring, or the opening for your Chanko. You're working on that, like whatever the goal is of that station. Could we have 2 or 3 options based on, one is good for the athlete that has trouble opening their shoulders, and then the other is really good for an athlete that has trouble controlling their ribcage and their pelvis, but they're all getting you towards the direction. One of them is maybe for the athlete that has already overworked their legs today, and we need to do more arms. Like, could we somehow keep in mind the end goal is this shape for a back handspring, right? But this athlete's going to do the full jumping thing, right? Because they're going to jump over an octagon and land into whatever position. And that works out great for that athlete who's jumping. The athlete who did a lot of jumping today, and I do want to keep their legs fresh because I want at least 3 or 4 vaults out of them today. Could they do the other part of it where they're actually laying on the octagon and they work on pushing through their shoulders when they hit the ground? Could we use some of the same stations and work on the same shapes or the same pushing or something like that and be more flexible, so that we have athletes that have overused their legs, they can just use their arms. And now all of a sudden, the reason I say this and I bring up this flexibility is not just inclusion of athletes that are training a multi-sport, and respecting their body at the same time, but it's also, inclusion. Where was I going with this? I lost my train of thought. Oh my gosh. So it's not just inclusion of inclusion of those that are injured, right? So that we don't have a lot of like, okay, here's your PT station off to the side. Though it sounds like LR, your PT station's in part of your cycle. They just switch out one of their stations, which is great. Is that idea of social well-being, mental well-being, emotional well-being by staying a part of the group, part of the structure. They're not off to the side, that kind of thing. But I'm just wondering if we could create a thought process when we're creating lesson plans. Do I have alternatives for arms versus legs being overworked for athletes that need more core control before they can do that? Do I have multiple phases? Like example, I was really impressed, and this was in the public school system. My daughter had a teacher in 3rd grade, and I was like, how are you doing this in the public school system? But it was very much like a Montessori approach. And basically she had assignments, whatever their task for the day was, which was like to learn addition, right? Or I'm just gonna use that as a sample, learn addition. And when a student in their math time finished their assignment for the addition, if they did really well and they finished it really well, she always had another one, which was the next level. And so she actually had, I don't know how she kept track, but she had 20, 30 kids in there. And she would have one, like my daughter was really good at math. So she was like up here at the level math on the assignment sheets, and she had gone past her what was expected for the day. And then she had others down here on just finishing that one sheet. And then if my daughter finished to a certain level of those, periodically she'd ask her to go help the other kid who's struggling with this thing, on the assignment sheet below that my daughter had already finished. So then if you think about the teaching paradigm of this, is that you're giving autonomy. They get to progress themselves on their own timeline, which in the Montessori approach and all the research behind that is actually really good, for outcomes and performance. And then they get to go back and teach it, which is like the closure of a learning paradigm, right? The closure of it is the ability to teach something. If you can teach something, then you're really good at it. You've mastered it in some light, right? So I'm just curious if there. So what are your thoughts, LR and KE? Like, what are your thoughts on the ability to create a more flexible lesson planning when you're creating stations, when you're creating your cycles, especially keeping in mind, in the fall, I'm going to have a bunch of volleyball players. Can I create flexibility around that? In the spring, I'm going to have a bunch of track athletes, probably coming in and out. Can I create flexibility in my structure, knowing that on some days they're going to come in? What's my backup if their legs are burnt, right? And then creating that mindset around that flexibility where it's like a station. You guys have like thousands of drills for every skill. Like LR, you were saying, like, I have to drill out a Yurchenko for a year. That's a lot of drills. Like, I know it. It's not the same drill. They're not drilling the same drill for a year. You're drilling like a whole drill progression. And because coaches are so good at that, I'm just curious, can we create some kind of flexibility that's fairly easy, right? I'm not asking you to like go and like, okay, can we use the octagon that's already set at that station for multiple ways of using it, right? Is this possible, you guys? Like, what are your thoughts on this when I am asking, like, can we have a flexible mindset that would help be more inclusive to athletes who are doing multiple sports as well as injured athletes, so that we can, on the fly, have something else? Because like that teacher, on the fly, here you go. You're done. You want to do another one? Yeah. And my daughter would get super excited about it. And it became a game for most of the class. That year, there was so much autonomy in that class. She also had flexible seating. So she was allowed to change her seating at any point in the school day. She just had to go up and move her spot on the board. And then, like, one seating was at a tall table, another was on the floor table, another one was on a sitting desk, another one was a regular table. Then they had one that was on a ball. They had like four or five of every seating option. And that gave autonomy, which is back to what LR was talking about, right? And so by creating, it was really cool. That whole the kids would come in and they made their own list. I remember they made their own list of as a team, as the class, they made their own list of expectations together. And then they wrote them on the thing and they stayed there for the whole year. And this was the most successful year of school I've ever seen with her, because, and she loved it. And she did hard things and loved it, because the teacher's paradigm, the teacher's thought process of how she tackled dealing with 23 kids who were all on different skill levels, all in different skill levels. There were several special needs kids in there that were on lower skill levels. And then you had several that were much higher than their grade level. And they were working higher than grade level skills at the same time in the same classroom. And she was just creating, there's so much flexibility in her assignments. If something didn't work and you got stuck, she'd drop you down. She'd give you the progression below, and then she'd pull three or four of them at a time. And then she'd pull three or four out here, and she just called them groups. But I found out later these four were struggling with something, so she sat and did that. These four were mid-level and doing really well, so she wanted to give them the next progression. These four over here were way up here at the top. She wanted to talk to them, see how they were doing, and give them something next, or teach them to teach those others below them. And she did that in these little small groups that she pulled things out. So how can we take these type of paradigms of teaching and apply them to gymnastics? So that's my last question, and then we'll wrap up. What are y'all's thoughts? Or did I say too much?
Um, I think it's possible. I just think it turns into not a bigger issue, but just a different conversation on how we train as coaches. Some people do not have a very diverse background. So if they're coming from strictly gymnastics, then you only know running drills for gymnastics. You only know how to, you're almost like a parrot. Like you learn more information, but you're only just repeating everything that you've heard, even if you don't understand the correction. And one of the things I did take at Congress was like a corrections workshop, and I just wanted to see what it was like. But I thought that was interesting because some people don't understand why that's why they're giving, why um another coach said it. If that makes sense. So for me, I have a personal training background. So I've taken like anatomy, physiology, and everything else. So when I'm in the gym, if I'm giving an exercise, I can tell what it's for. I'm able to switch it out. But for some of my peers, it doesn't make sense to them. So they don't understand when I ran track. So why I'm teaching sprints this way, or why I'm adding different drills that they're not used to seeing in the gym. Or if I'm saying, oh, hey, let's not do this. This is terrible for your hips. I know there's something out there, there should be some research that says we are no longer doing that, but just things like that. So
Yeah.
it's just what we have in our toolbox, needs to be a little bit more diverse. And I think sometimes we're limited, because we haven't received that additional information. So if you're talking to a younger coach, like how did you train up this compulsory coach? Did you just have them shadow you? Oh, they went through the steps. Maybe they coach preteen, but how much did they understand about the body? And we understand the sport, but a lot of times people don't understand the anatomy portion, and they can't tell you if a kid if they fail, there's like, oh, maybe it's this and it's not. And you're not a doctor, so you shouldn't diagnose, but you should be able to have kind of an idea of what muscle group they just tweaked. So I
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a really good point. I think this is why you hear me speak a lot in formulas, like shorten the lever arm, right? Like that's the simple thing, right? Is instead of straight legs, bend the knees. Um, look for these mechanics. But I think also, I mean, part of, I guess I say that is that I try to talk in formulas because I want people to start thinking for themselves. It's not magic in the exercise or magic in the movement. It's magic in knowing when to apply that movement and how to make it more challenging or easier. Like that's the magic, is to be able to change things. So I think you bring up a really valid point, which is part of why we hope to educate more. Like if someone wants to learn more about running, there's a couple things on my YouTube live right now with running coaches. I think we should take from other, like you said, you have a running background. So it's like you're running, you're going to bring in. So it's this idea of taking from other people who've already done it, like instead of reinventing the wheel, right? It's the same thing for any kind of exercise training. If you have a personal training background, you probably know how to make something easier or harder. Um, and that's kind of this idea. I'd like to challenge our gymnastics world to think more about.
Just
Kate, come
have
on
to
in.
know, sorry.
What? Go ahead, LR.
Be
Yeah.
okay with asking. Because I think sometimes we get stuck in the gym and you don't feel
Yeah.
like you can do something different. So I think for both athletes and coaches, it's just feeling restricted and not having a voice. And so you have girls shut down, quit because they don't feel like they have a voice in the gym. You have coaches who aren't not willing to learn more, but don't understand they can learn more. They can do something different because it's not the culture that they're used to. So it's just being stuck
That's
in that norm.
Uh, that's a really good point of the idea of because coaching burnout is real and it's a big problem. There's so many gyms across the country having trouble staffing. I've got a couple gyms I work with that are their wait lists are out the wazoo, and she's like, I just don't have enough staffing. She's like, I could have like 10 more classes, but I don't have staffing. And it's because there's so much burnout, but it's exactly what you just said, which is like either we've created a culture where it's not okay to ask questions, which I do think the old school culture that was that way. Like it's not okay as you should already know. Like there was a lot of I've been around enough coaching clinics. But like when I first started, it was 2008 when I was really just like watching, right? I was the medical staff, so I was watching. And I saw there was an air of like you don't know this already kind of feeling. Like this was like an air of like there were stupid questions, right? Like it was like, and I think there it is trickled by far way better over the last 5 years, and last 10 to 5 years, where those type of coaching clinics and hands-on spotting and stuff like that have really created a place to ask questions, right? A place to ask questions. But I think that old thought structure, either fear, whether it was the way they were brought up as an athlete in the sport, or how they entered into as a coach who maybe did or didn't know. I found some of the best coaches never were gymnasts. There's some really good coaches that were never gymnasts because they spent time with matter of fact, one's coming in, a couple of them's coming in later this year. They are amazing biomechanists and gym engineers. Like they deconstruct a skill into like its basics, and they just really became movement specialists and became really good. And they found a passion for gymnastics, and they love gymnastics, that's for sure. But like I think that yeah, it's a really good point that there's a lot of burnout and a staff shortage, partially because there's been some fear to ask for help or to try something new or to ask, is there another way to do this? And as a coach, and I've had several coaches I've interviewed over the last couple of years actually that were burned out and trying to find new gyms because they didn't feel like they weren't getting challenged education wise. They weren't learning. And so they had stagnated. And these are kind of like 20 to 30-year-old coaches who were like, I just want to learn something else. And the gym wasn't feeling that way to be open to it. Um, Come on in, Katie. What were you going to say? And then we'll wrap it up. Katie, I think you unmuted a couple times. Come on in.
I think the cat sat on it.
Oh,
It's
did,
warm.
did you have anything else to add? Did you?
No, not in this subject.
No, the subject. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that, so I love this idea, though, LR, and you do bring a bunch of great ideas about increasing the voice of the coaches and making sure our athletes have voices too. I also think, one fun game to always add in there and play is, once you've taught your athletes, especially these tweens to teens, like you've taught them basics, so they already know some basics of movement. Once they have that down, can we pose a question to them? Okay, well, this is the drill I've set out. Your legs are cooked today. Can you get, my goal is that you get this shape for the Yurchenko. I want you to work on that. Can you somehow, how could you modify this, right? Let them kind of play with it, especially in their teenage years. Like, might be interesting to see what they come up with. I have the bands, and I had this kid, I was at a gym and we were doing an exercise and he was just playing with the bands off to the side and he did this crazy thing with the bands and I was like, dude, that's a brilliant idea. Like I had never thought of using the 2/8 bands the way that the kid had set it up. I was like, I'm gonna play with that. I was like, I think I can do a whole progression now. So that's another place to throw it, and it gives the athlete a voice, and it also makes them think. They have to learn about their body. They have to think about and deconstruct the skill or whatever it is that you're wanting them to do. So there's a lot of learning to be had in that. Might be kind of interesting. And it might be hard at first because they've never had to think like that. But once you get them thinking like that, it might be interesting the outcomes that you got. Yeah, I love it. I really do love it. I hope, I know we haven't solved the world here, but it brings up a really good conversation to have and pose those questions as a sport in general. So there's the global as a sport and community of gymnastics, but then there's like in your gym and then with your team, there's those micro levels of that. How can we create more flexibility? How can we respect and offer support to these athletes that are wanting to do multi-sports? How can we promote it that's successful, right? And like you said, you may not ever talk to the soccer coach, but like, how can I use what the soccer coach did with them today to support my training plan? And how can I support that athlete and let them know that I'm happy they're doing things that they love? And that I know that that's going to help them stay in the sport longer. I love those. All these are really great questions. Sometimes, we leave with more questions than we had answers, but I think this is a great topic to talk about. And I know that there are a lot of coaches and gyms struggling with it, balancing the multi-sports. And then one just caveat that didn't get talked about was like the parents not wanting to pay for days when they're not in the gym. I think one aspect is letting the parent know, they're holding a spot, right? That's number one. Number two is that their tuition is not just going for those hours, right? It's going for educating those coaches. It's going for creating a good environment. I know that when I take my daughter to a place that I know is a good environment, they have good morals, values, and ethics. They support my daughter's emotional, mental well-being and growth and healing. That they work with what my daughter wants to do or doesn't want to do. I know that I am more willing to continue to support that because I know my money's not going. It's like making a donation to my church, right? Or another way to look at it is like having a membership at a place that you don't go all the time, right? I know that my money is going not just to support, not just for those hours that my daughter is there. It's going to support a local business. It's going to support a culture that I want to thrive. It's going to support a gym that's also producing, a bunch of amazing humans, that's contributing to our community, that has some kind of impact, right? When gyms have a good community relationship, right? They do things for the community. One of the gyms we just had put together because of one of the trainings I do through my Invincible Athlete program, we talk about pre-concussion screening. So she opened up a pre-concussion screening. This was her first round to do it. She did it to all her athletes, rec up to competition. No, she started with just the competitive team, the excel and competitive. So she opened it up to them. And then her plan is next year to open it up to the community. And if you're an athlete at the gym, you get a discounted rate, but the community will be a little bit more. but it's a pre-concussion screening that's not available in their community. And so she's going to offer that with nurses and other things that she had at her gym, with the training that I gave them and all the tools that we gave them to actually do the pre. So we gave them the tools to do pre-concussion screening, and then she got some nurses in the area. She paid them to come to the gym, and it went really, really well. It went really, really well with just the team. So next year she's going to open up to the community. So if we can create spaces where we offer parent education, or we offer, fun place, safe place to have Halloween trunk or treat, or we create a pumpkin patch at our, whatever the thing that we do, or we do pre-concussion screenings as part of the preschool physicals that they do, so maybe it's in September or in July. When we create that culture, I think, and then we present that to the parents, like, I know you don't want to have to pay when they're not here for 4 hours out of the week or 2 hours out of the week, but I want you to know that your money is going towards that community thing we do. It's going towards educating our coaches. It's going towards how we create this culture here. It takes time, energy, and money to be emotionally supportive, mentally supportive, physically supportive. We have to train everybody to understand how to communicate to each other and how to talk to kids. And, so I think if we can help build the culture of that, it's like, you're making a donation to your community. You're supporting a community. So it's back to that family-centered gym stuff that we talked about in the past. So I hope that helps a little bit. It's just some ideas. I understand it's a visionary idea. And I do understand that there are always obstacles in implying and implementing something new. But I think if we gave it enough energy and time and created enough culture and autonomy around it, I think it could be very successful. So anyways, that's that for this week. Thank you guys so much for joining. This was a great talk on multi-sport versus individual sports and how do we support them for overall health and well-being. It was a really good talk today. Good information that we need to kind of ponder and see how it works in our own communities and our own gym. Excited. Next week, I'm going to try to say her name correctly. I don't know why. Ever since I was little, I've said this wrong. But next week, we have Teresa Kalowski. That's how I say it. Why did I say it wrong? I always say it wrong. Teresa Gillespie, which she is a former alternate in 1996 Olympic team and also an amazing collegiate gymnast, Utah gymnast. She is a functional medicine physician and also physician assistant and also mindfulness coach. So she's coming in next week. We're going to talk about mindfulness in sport, optimizing performance without sacrificing our well-being. So come on in, share the link with everyone. Teresa's going to be really amazing. She brings some really cool tools in the mindfulness world. But it'll be really great to help, again, with part of that. How do we create a good sense of well-being in our culture of our gym? All right, you guys, I'll see you guys next week.